Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I am Sonolala, sitting in for Ayana Carter. Joining us this evening is Mr. Sekou Alleyne. He's the president of InvesTT. Good evening, Mr. Alleyne, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Mr. Lala.
Let's start by finding out the mandate of InvesTT and how are you all delivering on that mandate?
Sure. InvesTT's mandate is quite simple. It's to attract, facilitate, and retain investments in Trinidad and Tobago. And by investments, I mean direct operational investments, in that we assist businesses, both foreign and local, to set up their operations in Trinidad and Tobago across the gamut of everything they require in order to successfully expand or initiate their business in Trinidad and Tobago. Our role includes investor sourcing, which is the initial attraction of investment, basically promoting investment opportunities in Trinidad and Tobago. And then it goes on to facilitation of that investment. So based on the requirements of the investment and its footprint that it seeks in Trinidad and Tobago, again, whether foreign or local, InvesTT maps this out with the investor and then attempts to be that connectivity to every stakeholder and service provider required to get an investment going. And so lots of activities happen under that facilitation piece. And beyond that, our interest and our mandate is in investment retention, ensuring that the investment is sticky in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we offer significant aftercare services for those domestic operations that are already in the country and looking to expand, or those foreign businesses that have located in Trinidad and Tobago, and further on look to ensure that those operations are successful and continue to expand successfully, sometimes into new industries, not in the industries they are already invested in. So attraction, investor attraction, facilitation, aftercare services, and then very importantly beyond that is policy advocacy. So the policies required to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago is a sound investment environment, both domestically and for foreign businesses. InvesTT continues to play that role as well.
Now, as you talk about attraction, what are some of the things that actually attract investors to this country?
Many, in fact. I think the base level of Trinidad's labor pool, its technical skill across a myriad of industries, ensure that investors continue to be attracted and successful in Trinidad and Tobago. One needs to recall and remember that those investors investing either domestically or internationally are accessing a labor pool that is locally trained and educated. And so that continues to be the major point that investors make back to InvesTT in terms of their investments continuing to be successful and moving on from there. I think second to that, our sound infrastructure and industrial base. And that industrial base provides infrastructure across airport, roads, telecommunications, electricity, gas, etc. And so again, the investor needs to be able to get access to this infrastructure in order to export or to get its goods into market. And so they are continuing to be successful in doing so across industries, not from just the information that InvesTT shares while attracting them, but also in what they are able to actually experience within the country. Our location under the hurricane belt, or I should say in an area where there is a low occurrence of natural disasters, allows for business continuity, and that, of course, is very important both for services and goods-based businesses. And one of the most important reasons investors are attracted to in Trinidad and Tobago is its low business costs. Primarily through our low cost of energy, but in other areas as well, we are comparatively pooled with the region and internationally in terms of business costs, and then much lower when it comes to our energy costs.
Now, the TNT Chamber would have recently issued its list of budget recommendations to streamline the processes to improve the ease of doing business. How does InvesTT view this?
I see it going well, actually. And InvesTT, one of the things I mentioned before, one of our mandates is policy advocacy. And so we work very closely with the business chambers across Trinidad and Tobago. I actually recently met with Mr. DeGans since he's come in to lead the TT Chamber, and we work very closely with the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, Mr. Roach and Mr. Ramdeen. And actually we just recently had an interaction with the Eastern Business Merchants Association and the Sangre Grande Business Chamber. And really, we do that for two reasons. One, because we want to see that connectivity for investors into the local supply chains and the local businesses and the local business chambers. And two, we want to identify pain points or challenges that investors may have that we would advocate. And so in interacting with those stakeholders, InvesTT does play a policy advocacy role to its line ministry, which is the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And on an individual investor basis, we map out what it takes and requires for an investor to set up in Trinidad and Tobago across multiple industries. And you'd appreciate that it's very different depending on the type of investment and the size and scale and scope of the investor. And where that investor does have any challenges or bottlenecks, we work to work with the stakeholders and the regulatory issues to smoothen that out for them. Thus far, we've seen investors able to achieve their business setup and expansion goals within the time frame required, and we continue to work with them to ensure that happens, as well as work with the stakeholders to identify any new areas or any areas that can be streamlined on a longer term basis.
How many investors have we seen coming into TNT?
Significant. Now, you'd appreciate, while we have the mandate to attract and facilitate investment focused outside of oil and gas and energy, all investment does not necessarily come through InvesTT, but we've seen a significant uptick recently coming out of the COVID period and even substantively within the COVID period. So InvesTT has actually focused in the last 5 years or so on the facilitation and attraction of call center / business process outsourcing type opportunities. And we had our first major success back in 2015 with which is ICOR, which is a major international call center / business process outsourcing firm entering the market, starting off its first operations at Taman Intech Park with just about 200 people. They've now expanded to 3 locations in Trinidad and Tobago, both Tamana Barataria and Central Chaguanas, Trinidad and Tobago, with about 2,000 employees. And they're providing 100% of their services back into the US and North American market. This is fully export oriented. And on the back of that, we've also seen another 4 or 5 call centers enter the market. On the back of that success, again, because of the labor pool and the telecoms infrastructure, we now have Teleperformance, which is in fact the largest BPO firm in the world, just about to launch, looking at doing 800 to 1,000 persons in the Port of Spain area. So you want to look out for that. More recently, we've seen manufacturing firms, again, leveraging our infrastructure, our labor pool, as well as our brand new real estate industrial development, the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate. Summit Luggage is out of China, and they are actually going to be manufacturing luggage for US-based clientele, well-branded international luggage that everyone would recognize. And so investors, again, are looking at seeing the opportunities, seeing why Trinidad and Tobago is a great place to invest, and InvesTT continues to facilitate those.
Now, in December last year, you launched a drive to promote the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate at the China, Latin American, and the Caribbean Summit. How has that been going?
It's been going very well. On the back of the Belt and Road Initiative, which was initiated by the People's Republic of China 10 years ago, and Trinidad and Tobago being the first signatory in the Caribbean region to the Belt and Road Initiative, came the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate. And it really was a required industrial expansion in the central part of the country that gives you close access to the Point Lisas port. It gives you close access to the existing industrial infrastructure that is already in Point Lisas, that has been so successful in the economic development in Trinidad and Tobago, and provided the on-site infrastructure in terms of access to factory shells, electricity, natural gas, sewage and water, etc., really offering the industrial space required for investors locally to be able to expand, as well as international investors looking at Trinidad and Tobago and its overall investment opportunity, and being able to immediately access an industrial park that provides the footprint for it to expand and give close access to its export markets, which is why the port of Point Lisas and its proximity is so important. We also actually had 5G being instituted on the park, which is the first one in the Caribbean region. So it's actually been quite interesting and quite positive for InvesTT to also have the mandate to tenant that park, as well as introduce and attract manufacturing, logistics, and ICT-based businesses to the park. In fact, Summit Luggage, which I just mentioned, which is one of the first Chinese tenants as an investor in Trinidad and Tobago, is one of also the first ones that is actually now producing luggage on the park itself.
Since that call, how many investors have you seen actually buy into the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate, and how many tenants have you sought to manage?
So we've had 14 tenants, both local and foreign, actually sign letters of offer to set up on the park, and all are in various stages of beginning their planning period for setting up on the park. We have another 12 in the pipeline with about 7 that are very advanced and close to signing letters of offer. So we actually expect that by the next fiscal year, halfway through the next fiscal year, we actually may be very close to approaching full occupancy of the park. And one of the great problems we're having now is to ensure that we have the appropriate spaces so that everybody can fit in and be able to start their operations sooner within the next fiscal year or so. And really, hopefully, in terms of our advocacy to government, look to create more space in that area for industrial expansion.
The average Joe may say, how does this benefit TNT? What do you have to say about that?
From the outset, it's employment, and it's technically skilled and high-level employment. So when you're looking at manufacturers that are coming in with full export markets like Summit Luggage that are not really selling any goods domestically, and those persons needing to hire 80 to 100 people technically skilled to run their operations, you're looking at employment. Of course, you're looking at the foreign exchange earnings as well. Many of the domestic and international customers on the park, again, are setting up either to expand their export base or to support export markets they already have access to. And of course, foreign exchange earnings and access to that is important for our economic development. So you're looking at GDP expansion, you're looking at expansion in a critical non-oil and gas sector for us, which is manufacturing, logistics, and ICT, and the employment opportunities that are going to be created for Trinidadians and Tobagonians.
A foreign company decides to do business in TNT. Walk us through that process, and how does the country, again, benefit from this?
Well, I mean, the benefits are there from the overall economic impact of that investor becoming operational and employing Trinidadians to seek and support and serve export markets. In terms of their setup process, it really depends on the type of business that is coming to us and the stage in the process that they come to us. Now, again, tying it back to InvesTT's mandate, attract, facilitate, and retain, we have investors that come to us that are already invested in Trinidad and Tobago and looking to expand. And their process is going to be different than somebody who started the process of setting up in the first instance and maybe is running into a challenge and then comes to InvesTT. Very different again from somebody that we are attracting that maybe doesn't even know Trinidad and Tobago exists as an investment opportunity. But let me start with an example from somebody starting from the beginning. For someone that InvesTT, through its lead generation activities, its use of international lead generation consultants, its social media promotion, its attendance at international conferences, identifies somebody that is looking to expand in the Latin American and Caribbean region. The first thing that we do is we share all the information and the data points required for them to make a positive decision. Then we support them if they are so entertained and would like to come to the country to do their own due diligence. We support them airport to airport in providing all the meetings, the connectivity, basically anything they need to do or anyone they need to meet with, including a potential labor pool, in order for them to then make a positive decision to invest. And that can happen over multiple site visits into Trinidad and Tobago. It can happen virtually and it can happen physically. And beyond that, we then map out the regulatory approvals required. So if it's manufacturing, let's say they're moving to a factory shell, they're going to need town and country approvals, they're going to need environmental management authority approvals, and the likewise. And so we map that out and have key connectivity into those agencies to ensure that we are able to move that approval process forward on the investor's timeline. And so again, every investor is different. Some need access only to office space and not industrialist space. Some set up remotely. So I spoke about Teleperformance, about to set up in a physical space. They, in fact, have 80 agents working fully remotely since last year. And so they did not require a physical space for approvals, etc., but they required access to a labor pool, which we were able to work with them to get access to, that then is supported by the telecommunications infrastructure to the home for them to be able to provide the services outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
As of recent, what sort of investments are we seeing into Trinidad and Tobago, and is there a certain niche that persons are looking to tap into locally?
We're seeing a lot of investments in the business process outsourcing space. And again, that market has expanded exponentially with COVID and coming out of COVID, and with a lot of services having to be provided virtually. And so many of those investors have been looking for a nearshore location. They operate out of the US and they support the US markets, and they traditionally operate out of Philippines, India, etc., looking at a non-saturated market in the nearshore within close flight proximity to the US markets. And because of that, we've seen a lot of interest and demand in that sector, and Trinidad and Tobago has been able to position itself again as a comparatively costed, unsaturated market with the telecom infrastructure that allows you to provide services not just from an office space, but also from the home. And we see those investors like ICO and Teleperformance setting up and being very successful, and we have about 4 or 5 other call centers moving in on that basis. Brand new industry to Trinidad and Tobago just 7 years ago, and it is growing, and we're deepening this. We're seeing a lot of interest in the manufacturing sector. Again, to access the opportunity that is the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate and its proximity to the Point Lisa Port to support export markets. And we're seeing domestic firms that are looking for places to expand. There are many of those that are manufacturing in Trinidad and Tobago now. They understand the market, they understand the export opportunity. They just don't have the space to expand. So we're seeing a lot of interest from them for the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate and for other locations within Trinidad and Tobago. Logistics-wise, again, much enthusiasm in that space, given Trinidad and Tobago being a major trading partner in the Southern Caribbean, and actually seeing some of the expansion happening in South America, Guyana, Suriname, and many looking at the opportunity of using Trinidad and Tobago as an infrastructural base from a manufacturing and logistics standpoint to support expansion in this market, but as well expansion in the CARICOM markets, particularly in Guyana and Suriname.
In January, you issued a call for investment projects. Has local companies been heeding that call? They
have. We've seen a lot of interest actually in the Agrotech space. Many persons looking and answering that call. I believe it was to reduce the food import bill in CARICOM by 25% by 2025, and looking to do their part. One of the main investors that we facilitated, not necessarily out of that calls for proposals, but out of previous attraction initiatives, is the Berry Cove project in Tobago, in Cove, Tobago, which will be and has in fact started producing leafy greens coming out of their hydroponic operation, and will be producing strawberries as well for the domestic as well as export markets. So that's import substitution of an agricultural product that does not necessarily grow naturally in the Caribbean region, but uses technology to be able to support that food, that import substitution food initiative. So we're seeing a lot of interest in the ag tech space, and again, that manufacturing space. Persons contacting us because they are successfully manufacturing now, but they really need access to the appropriate infrastructure and the proximity to the Point Lisa port in order to support their export expansion goals.
It's interesting because we talk about agriculture and we see the traditional agriculture taking place, but now we're seeing bits and pieces of trying to diversify agriculture somewhat.
Absolutely. And again, it's a question of us leveraging technology that exists internationally in order to play an import substitution game, as well as increase the amount of agriculture we produce in Ireland for our own consumption. And so we expect to see much more of that interest coming. And in fact, you will see more call for projects, both locally and internationally, from InvesTT supporting the expansion of that sector locally.
InvesTT was launched just about more than a decade ago, 2012 to be exact.
Correct.
What are some of the challenges you've seen since then?
Well, one of the major challenges we had in our inception and continues to be is really the awareness of Trinidad and Tobago as an investment opportunity outside of the traditional sectors that we've been successful in, like oil and gas and like some of the cultural sectors. And so in many instances, when you are internationally speaking to persons about Trinidad and Tobago, they just don't know too much about the opportunity that is here. In fact, when you speak Caribbean, in order to anchor them, they think Sunsea and Sand immediately. And so when we explain our industrial base and our history in oil and gas and the real investment that we've been made in developing the infrastructure to support ourselves and our continued growth as an industrial base servicing export markets, it takes multiple interactions, sometimes over a year and a half, to get them to really understand the opportunity and get them to come into Trinidad and Tobago to kick the proverbial tire. So, the major challenge is continuing to create that awareness of our investment opportunities. And again, we've been working very closely with our foreign missions, key markets like New York, London, China, South Africa, the UK, to ensure that they have the tools to continue to promote Trinidad and Tobago as an investment opportunity. They have the connectivity into InvesTT to ensure that we are able to speak to those investors very quickly, as well as working with our diaspora. We have a program and initiative called the Diaspora Business Associates. Diaspora in all of those sectors that I spoke to recently, are all well positioned in those industries all over the world. And we have tapped them and are working with them continuously and assiduously to bring investors to us and to make those investment opportunities aware across the globe.
What are some of these success stories? And I'm sure you have a lot of those.
I will say Summit Luggage again, major success story, having that type of operation within Trinidad and Tobago and that major investment out of China. And that came from 2 years of working with our foreign mission. I just mentioned that, our Ambassador Loh, doing very, very good work in China to bring that investment to bear. ICOR and Teleperformance, I mentioned them as well, major success story. And on the backs of those, and those are very public, I wouldn't want to say all the names, but key projects in the manufacturing sector that you will be hearing about in the future as we launch them and do some public relations around them, as well as a company named Ascensos in the call center space. They have, again, working with the UK High Commission, they came into Trinidad and Tobago and recently launched with 25 persons, and again, successfully looking at expansion from there as well. And they had some PR around and public relations around their operation as well. Some of the others, as we move forward into the rest of the fiscal year and the calendar year, you will be hearing about from InvesTT.
You can never have too much investment, but are we attractive enough? Are we having enough investment into Trinidad and Tobago?
In the non-oil and gas space, we have a significant amount of investment in the manufacturing, logistics, ITC, and agricultural technology space. And more importantly, we have persons in the pipeline that are currently considering doing investment projects. InvesTT urges them to contact us for us to be able to support the success and the expansion of those investment projects. You are correct. You can never have too much investment. InvesTT, while it's been substantively meeting and exceeding its targets, we continue to push forward with even further stretch targets so that more and more investors are able to take advantage of those opportunities. And we are able, again, for the average Trinidadian to provide those employment opportunities that don't necessarily exist in Trinidad and Tobago today.
In terms of what's next for InvesTT, how are you leveraging in the next decade or so?
So I talked about the challenge of investor awareness and being able to ensure that all those in the sectors that I've already mentioned are aware, and if they have an investment project, they come to Trinidad and Tobago and they take a look at us as a major option. It is in the public domain that Invest Trinidad and Tobago is going to be merged / amalgamated with Export Trinidad and Tobago, and they focus on the export promotion, as well as Creative TT that focuses on the film, fashion, and music. And so what that is creating a larger, more resourced entity that is now consistently promoting Trinidad and Tobago in key markets, not just for investment, but also for exports of domestic products into those markets, and coverage of all the major sectors, including those creative sectors. So we expect very shortly that amalgamation is going to be put in place, and so we see the resources available to us now to continue to deepen that investment promotion and overall country branding and promotion of Trinidad and Tobago as an investment destination and as a place from which goods and services can be purchased.
Your message to local or foreign companies to invest in TNT?
Foreign companies, if you have a project for Latin America and the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago is a serious contender to consider. InvesTT will work with you to provide you all the information required such that you can choose Trinidad and Tobago as your investment partner. not necessarily just as an investment destination, but as a partner. And to the local domestic businesses that already understand operating in Trinidad and Tobago and they understand the export markets that they are looking to serve, again, InvesTT offers its services free of charge to support your decision making, to support your information gathering and analysis, to support your access to the regulatory approvals required, and to continue to support you as you are successful and looking to expand.
Your final thoughts?
My final thoughts, well, thank you for allowing me to share the information on Invest Trinidad and Tobago, and I want to thank my team at InvesTT for being as supportive as it is in us achieving what we have. I want to actually thank the Board of InvesTT as well as the Ministry of Trade and Industry in its support, and not only for the policy advocacy, but of course for ensuring that these investors are successful. And again, to reiterate, for the foreign investor and the local investor, there are investment opportunities. There's a significant amount of investment interest in Trinidad and Tobago. Let InvesTT to continue to be your partner or start as your partner to realize your business expansion plans in this region.
Mr. Alleyne, thanks very much for joining us on this week's episode of Delving Deeper.
Thank you.
Join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am Sonolala, and on behalf of the entire crew, have a good night.